Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar from MSAB. Today we have returned for XAMN Turn the Dials to 10, and over the past 6 weeks we have covered a vast amount of preparation, intelligence and investigation, but today sees us return for the final part, which is part 3. Today we're going to have a quick recap of investigating unsupported applications and some of the steps that we need to do before we look at the reporting options that are available to you in XAMN Pro. So let us move on. And for those of you unaware who I am, just a quick recap, and if you want to find out the full details you can always revisit part 1 of this webinar where I explained in detail. But I'm Adam Furman, I'm a tech evangelist here with MSAB, and I've been with MSAB coming up 5 years, but prior to that I was in UK law enforcement where I was a police officer and spent the majority of my career in a forensic lab. And I'm very fortunate to be a speaker at both national and international conferences, so I get to see the pain points across the globe that are facing forensic examiners. And please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out to me via email, follow me on X, and please reach out to me. I am always more than happy to assist with any issues that you're facing in your investigation, whether it involves MSAB tools or any tool in general. I will always do my best to assist. So before we look at part 3, let us take a moment to quickly recap what we covered in part 2 of this webinar series. And in part 2, we looked at preparation. So part 1 was all about preparation, and we covered how we should have a digital forensic strategy. We had a whole host of documentation, and if we have a look at that documentation about preparation, let us bring up some of the details that we looked at. So we covered things such as a forensic strategy. And we covered the importance of being able to do this, and if you're the person who receives a submission, this is the sort of detail that you're going to want them to cover. So we want to know what offence we're investigating. We want to know if there's co-defendants, and all of that sort of vital information is going to allow you to create a strategy to deal with that. And then from the strategy, it allows us to build on that further. And then we can create an actual investigation case that we can then work on. So for example, in this form here, you can see that we've got a lot of data that needs to be populated, but it's all about the reason that we're following these standards. We have to be able to prove that what we're doing is proportionate to the circumstances that we're investigating. Of course, it has to be legal and lawful, accountable, necessary, and we need to think ethically, and we need to minimise collateral intrusion wherever possible. Plus, we need to do these things to keep our investigation on track. Mobile devices contain millions of artefacts, and if we're not strategic in our planning, we could end up going down the rabbit hole that we wish we hadn't. So following this preparation, which preparation is key to anything in life. If you're about to interview a suspect or a victim or witness, you prepare for that interview by looking to set out what you're looking to achieve from that interview. A digital investigation is no different. We also looked at how to validate what your tool is showing you. Whether that's a tool from MSAB or a competitor tool, we showed you how to validate those findings using XAMN Pro. But you should also be considering any tool you use, how you can validate what it's reporting to you. We also covered in part 2 how to handle data that isn't passed by your tool. And we looked at validation in relation to the SANS Institute. And if you do a quick Google search for 6 steps to successful mobile validation, you'll find their extremely handy document that will help set some base rules for your laboratory. We covered how to go on a deep dive, knowing where and how to look. You need the ability to research unknown package names. Not everything is named correctly. You're not always going to have a com.instagram. It may be an application that you've never heard of. So we need to carry out research, and we'll have a look at that shortly. The ability to use more than one tool. This is covered within the SANS document and is publicly advised that you should be using more than one tool, if anything, for validation. Also, we covered how don't be afraid to reach out for assistance. There are several community platforms where you can ask for such help. You have useful platforms such as the Cyber Social Hub, Forensic Focus, the DFIR Discord channel, Listserv, and many other platforms. And it doesn't matter how many years someone has been in the industry, I can guarantee you that if you ask a question, the community will be there to assist you. But in saying that, when you're working on a case, always have a test device with you. And why do I say that? If you're investigating an unsupported app, start to create test data. Start to share locations, send messages, edit messages, delete messages. Make sure you keep a detailed run and log of what you're doing, and then extract your device. Go in and hunt for that data. It's going to be far easier because you know what you should be looking for. And once you've successfully reverse engineered that app, share the findings. Create a blog post, document what you did to find out the solution to that problem. The community will benefit, and it's what this community is all about. It's all about giving back and not making somebody else repeat the same steps. We all prosper from working like this. And talking about prospering from others, these are some of the additional open source tools that I recommend. And these tools are great for validation. And of course, you can use a combination of these open source and paid for tools. And in no particular order, the top one I want to mention is the leap parsers. So these were originally founded by Alexis Brigoni over in the US. And since then, these have been contributed to by the entire DFIR community. There is a whole bunch of leap parsers, whether it's Android, iOS, vehicle, and so on. So all you need to do is go onto GitHub and search for Briggs, and you will find the collection of those tools. The next tool is Artex. So if you're dealing with an iOS device, this is a great tool written by Ian Whiffen that you can use for verification, research, and analysis. And again, another great open source tool. The very bottom details some of the tools that you're going to need to carry out advanced application analysis. So you're going to need a timestamp decoder. So there's one up there, Decode. There's also other ones such as MFT Stampede. Notepad++ can be used as a simple way of viewing XML files or script editing along with PyCharm and others. But you're also going to need, and this is probably going to be your most important tool, a database viewer. I highly recommend DB Browser, which allows you to view data and execute SQL queries, which we will cover shortly. And finally, if you're not working on a Mac, which the majority of forensic tools will work on Windows, you need the capability to viewplists, which I strongly recommend Plist Editor Pro. The final one there in the bottom right is CyberChef. You're going to come across a host of data formats when you're conducting your analysis. CyberChef is a great way of decoding that into a readable format. For example, if you carry out a Google search for base64 formatting, this is a way of handling that data and seeing what it actually translates to. So have a look for CyberChef, which was a tool built by the GCHQ here in the UK and is available free for you to use. So, how do we locate third-party apps? If you come across an app of relevance and you see it on a handset, you're going to need to know how to locate all of the associated files. So you're going to need to learn how to look for the app software itself, the application package. But more interestingly, you're going to want to look for the user data, the files that are used by that application. And you could, of course, start by looking for the package name. I want to look for Instagram, so that's what I'm going to do a search for. But all iOS and Android applications are going to have unique names. Search for those package names on the internet. And what do I mean by that? So you can see here on the left hand side of the screen, some of the package names are very nice. org.telegram, probably going to be Telegram. com.whatsapp, likely to be WhatsApp. But like the one that's highlighted on screen here, that is not plain as to what that application is. But carrying out a quick web search reveals it to be TikTok. So again, just be mindful to go through some of your package names, and if there's any you're unsure of, just carry out a web search and you're likely to find it as a hit from the Google Play or the Apple App Store. And to do that, you can simply pop into XAMN, and we could go to all artifacts. We could go down to, we want to view in a file tree, and if we look here, here is our Musical.ly as was seen on the slide, and we can simply go to the file name here and copy and then do a web search for that. Moving on to some of the common artifacts that you're likely to come across. The most popular on mobile devices is SQLite. And why? It is free. It's an open source platform that's extremely lightweight, and that's why it's popular. Now with SQLite, you're going to find that they have standard headers, but there's no common file footer that exists for these, and we'll have a look at how we can deal with that shortly. SQLite also means that the file extension is unreliable. There's just a few examples on the screen, such as .db, .sqlite, .sqlitedb, .cache, and so on. You can't always just look for an extension. So this is where we need to start thinking about headers and footers. But obviously we've got no footer, so we need another way of dealing with this if we want to create a script to pass all of these out. Now when we deal with SQLite in a forensic manner, we have to consider the write-ahead log and the journal files. Now why do we need to consider these? Database files need resilience. You wouldn't be very happy if you opened up your messaging platform of choice and got informed that the database is corrupt. So applications use these methods to avoid corruption, and any new or edited or deleted entries are then kept in the write-ahead log. And then after so many transactions or the application is closed, that write-ahead log is then committed to the database. Now if you're viewing these files outside of a forensic tool, your forensic tool is going to handle this. But if you're viewing them outside, it's not. And let's have a look at a quick example of why you need to be careful with this. So let us go back to our output, and let's go to, so in here, well, let's start at the start. Let us go to WhatsApp, which we know has a multitude of databases associated with it to run. And I'm going to dump out this entire database folder. So I right click, export all files, and I'm going to choose where to dump them to. So I'm just going to dump them onto my desktop and call these database WhatsApp. Select my folder, and the export is now complete. Now I want to open that folder, so I click open folder, and that is opened over here. This text document is the log file. The log file details what files have been exported and if any errors were encountered. So it's great for your audit log that needs to be repeatable by a third party. So when I go into databases, you can see I can now see a multitude of database files. And of course we're coming across the write-ahead log and even a journal file at the top. But there is other files as well. So you can see the -shm. So that is shared memory. So when we export these, so if we wanted to export the location database, we're going to need all three of these files. And if we create a quick copy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder in here called with, and then I'm going to create a second folder called without. And so with, we're going to paste all of our files into, so then we've got the write-ahead log and the shared memory, and then I want one without. And then I copy that into there. And then to begin with, I'm going to have a look without. So I'm going to look at the database in its original form. And did you notice what quickly happened there? When we opened it, a write-ahead log file and a shared memory was automatically created. And as we go through and we want to go to browse data, you can see that this database is brand new. It's never been used. So there is no data in the original .db file on its own. So any data that is waiting will be in the write-ahead log file. So we can close DB browser and you'll notice that those files are then committed to the database. So let us go to our with folder and let's open the same database. And you can see here that we've now got tables. So we've got cache, we've got sharers, and we've got other data. So this is all data that we didn't have when we just looked at the database on its own. Now watch what happens when I close that database. The files are committed. So if we hadn't have dealt with this how we did, we would have lost any importance of the write-ahead log file. So just bear that in mind when you're dealing with these files externally from a forensic tool. So we spoke about that databases have a very nice header. And you can see that on the left-hand side here. You can see that the header, when it's decoded from hex, is very nice and it tells us exactly what it is. Now, we can of course create a script if we wanted to pass that from unallocated space to look for that header. That's easy, but we covered that we didn't know what the footer was. So we need to work out how to carve a database in its entirety. And here is a quick example of how to do that. So databases have a common structure, and you can see here the page size can be found here, and we can see that that equals 4096 bytes. Then we need to find out the file size of the databases, we need to multiply that by the number of pages, which can be seen at this offset. Now this is a nice simple calculation because we can see that the hexadecimal value is A, so we know is 10, which gives us a very easy calculation of 4096 bytes times 10, which gives us our length here. If we created a script to look for those two values, we would then be able to carve out all database files. So just a visual representation of the write-ahead log in play. So when we first create a database, we've just got a .db file or whatever extension it's got. It's made up of its pages. And then what happens when we start working with that database file is that it receives a write-ahead log file. And any changes that we make are then contained in the write-ahead log file. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got page 1, stays as it is, there's been no changes. Page 3 is the same, but page 2 has got new content within it. Now, if we just examine the database on its own, it would have the old entries, but once we'd committed with the write-ahead log file, we would get the new entries. So it's worth bearing in mind when you're dealing with these files. And continuing with databases, other files of interest are going to be the embedded files within databases. So databases can contain embedded artifacts such as blobs, which is binary large objects. These could be JPEGs, these could be P-lists, and you need a tool that allows you to view that blob data so you can investigate if it may be of relevance. We also need the capability to deal with timestamps within SQLite. You need the ability to recognize and interpret date and time information. And as can be seen on screen, the most common is Unix time. And a quick reminder, it's a number of seconds since midnight UTC on the 1st of the 1st, 1970. And you can see on the screen there that I'm using the open source tool Decode, and I've copied the value within the timestamp column. And you can see on the right hand side, once I hit Decode, I get a readable format on the left. However, if you had this database, like the one can be seen on screen, it would be very time consuming to do that for every single entry. It's very good for a quick way of seeing roughly where you are, so you can recognize all those timestamps that start with 1704 are likely going to be your date. But you need a way to deal with all of the timestamps in that column. And that is done by executing a SQL query. So you can see here that I've written a very simple query, and it allows me to use the date time function. I then have that as a new column as a readable timestamp, and that allows me to then deal with those timestamps without interpreting them every single time. And you can see the very final line of my SQL query is to order by the readable timestamp. Again, just using SQL queries to reduce the noise from your database files. Now, if you do find yourself getting into SQL queries, I strongly recommend the SQLite Bible, which is SQLite Forensics, which was written by Paul Sanderson. And you can see there that the technical editors include the author of SQLite, as well as other respected individuals in the industry. This is a vital read if you're planning on getting deep into SQLite Forensics. Some of the other formats that you're going to come across, data types, are P-lists. P-lists can be simple and they can be extremely complex. These are configuration files, and they can be found within several databases on iOS as binary large objects. And you can see here on the left-hand menu that some of the data is clearly understandable, but some of it is not, and that's because it's encoded in base 64. And on the right hand side of the screen, you can see that I've copied that base 64 text and I've pasted it into CyberChef, which we spoke about at the beginning. That then outputs it into a readable format that I can understand. So again, it's just another format that you need the ability to deal with. Now, P-lists can be binary as well, and they can contain a potential treasure trove of information. We can find operating system and app configuration information. All of these things can help us with things such as attribution. So we may get account information, last user activity, recent files that have been used, identifiers such as the ICCID. These are all great for attribution. So you need the ability to read these files and understand them. And you can see in the top left of the screen, we're looking at a binary P-list, very nicely decoded in the decoded text, so as a BP list. Now, if you're looking at it in a tool like Notepad++, you're going to need a plugin to view it. A tool like Plist Editor Pro is going to allow you to view that data. And you can see in the top right, I'm viewing it as an XML file. And in the very bottom picture on the screen, I'm viewing it as a list. So I'm expanding the data entries that are contained within it in the start and end tags. And what do I mean by start and end tags? So when we view it as an XML view, plist files will have a start and end tag that contains data within. And you can see on the example on the screen, we've got a start and end tag of data. And any information contained within those tags, we may need to scrape out as it may be valuable data. And talking of which, those start and end tags make scripting far easier, because we can simply create a script to pass out all of the information between the start and end tag. And you may remember from part 2, I spoke about the importance of the persistent properties XML file that's on Androids. And you can see here that Eric, one of our product specialists in France, saw the webinar and noticed that our tool was not decoding this information as standard. So he has been out and written a Python script to decode that properties for us. So now, rather than look for that file and tag it, I can simply run the Python script that Eric has written. Again, just showing you how learning some scripting and understanding the formatting of these files will allow you to deal with it with much more simplicity going forward. And finishing on reporting. So like the top bullet point says, always keep your reports simple and only include relevant information. The more information that you include, the longer you're going to be in the stand and questioned on it. And the importance of knowing the reader. Do not go into technical detail unless you're called for, and explain it in a way that the reader is going to understand. And I always advocate that do your best to convey the way you interpreted the case so that the reader can see it through your eyes. Try and explain every step as to why you got to your conclusion. And remember, any information that you include, you have to be able to explain. So if you're relying on hexadecimal details, do your best within the report to show how you interpreted it and came up with readable human format. So, shall we have a look at a demonstration? So we return to our case in XAMN Pro. And you'll remember last time how we worked with certain files and we had certain tags that were open for our investigation. And if I clear any filters that I'm currently working with, you'll see that the tags that I've been working with. I didn't have any for legal privilege, but I've got some evidence, I've got some chats of interest, and I've got the device time zone and language. Now, if I close some of these entries, now I left this tab open because I wanted to show you the importance of snapshots. So I've ran a keyword search here for the text snapshot, and that has brought back these hits as you can see on screen. And these first two I'm not interested in, but I wanted to show you these ones. So you can see here this is a screenshot, and if we look you can see that the file path contains snapshots. Now what are snapshots? These exist on iOS as well. And snapshots are your device's capability when you switch between apps to show a quick graphical representation of what the app was last doing. So when you switch between apps, your device captures a snapshot of what that app looked like when you switched. So we can see one here, and if we click on it, we can see that it's an Instagram picture. And very handy here is that I can see that this clearly is the user's Instagram picture. So that could be extremely useful. Now, you can see here, obviously, when we first ran our snapshot keyword search, we brought back irrelevant data. We're not interested in these two. So what I've done here is I've right-clicked and I've created a folder filter. So it's just going to create a filter on this file path. And tab 5 shows you that file path, and we're now reduced to 9 artifacts that exist in that folder. And as we scroll through them, we can see some of the other snapshots that have been captured. And if we have a look at this, we can see that we've got phone numbers, and we could have half-written or deleted messages in these snapshots. So they're extremely useful. Now, if I wanted to add one of these to my reports, I can, of course, right-click and I could tag it. And at the moment, I don't have a tag for snapshot. So I can do create new tag, and I can do snapshot. And that is now tagged as a snapshot. And again, choose tag, snapshot. And that is a way of dealing with evidence, so I can then subsequently report on it. Now another way of tagging is by using Report Builder. And we'll cover Report Builder very shortly, but first of all I want to feature the reporting options available to you within XAMN Pro. If we go to the ribbon bar at the top and we go to the floppy disk with the plus, this is Save a Subset. So we can save filtered or selected artifacts as a new XRY file. So think of this as a portable case if that's the way that you've been used to with other tools. And when I click that button, the very top, I'm asked, what do I want to create in that subset? Do I want just the one selected file that I'm looking at, or the items I'm filtered on? So if you've set a load of tags and you have just filtered on all your tags, this is a good way for you to share that as a subset. Now, of course, I can protect the file with a password, but I want to express the importance of this one. If you know that the person you're sharing the file with does not have XAMN, tick the box to include the viewer. They don't need a license and they can use the free viewing software to then review that data within XAMN. And then hit save and that export would take place. The next button next to that floppy disk is the report and export. And when we click that, we can see all of the available formats that XAMN can report in. And the top row of icons is as expected. But bear in mind the artifacts as well at the top here. Ensure that you're filtered or selected appropriately rather than leave it on all, which is going to output your entire file. Along the very bottom, we've got VIX if you're dealing with CADE or child abuse image database. Then we've got dictionary. Dictionary is a really valuable output, and here let me explain why. If you're dealing with a case that involves 10 mobile devices, for example, and you have 2 devices that you can't get into, dictionary from the files that you can get into is going to allow you to create a brute force word list. Now, how does it do this? We know that when XRY extracts a device, it indexes every word from that device. Because when you're searching for it in XAMN, you can see that the text starts to auto-populate and suggest text within that file. Dictionary allows you to create that as a word list, which is then extremely handy if that password has been reused to then brute force other devices. Now, just wrapping up, we've got Nuix and relativity if you're in the e-discovery industry, and if you're dealing with computer and mobile exhibits, you might want to export it to Tatego to carry out your review of computer and phone exhibits. But the one I want to focus on is Report Builder. So I covered how to tag items. Now if we click on this one, we can of course tag it like we did before, but I can also come to this one and add Report Builder. And you can see there's also a keyboard shortcut there, Control B. So if I then just hit Control B, that is now going to add that file to Report Builder. And it's asking for a data block name, and this will make sense shortly. And I'm going to call this Snapshot 2. That has now been added to our Report Builder. And I've got a tab open previously from Report Builder, but what we're going to do is we're going to close that and we're going to start afresh. So when I click View Report Builder, and let's delete all these blocks, this is what Report Builder will look like when you first go in. Now, Report Builder is a very simple way of having data blocks that you drag in and customize the way you want a report to look. For example, if you want to start with a cover page like most reports should, you simply drag that block and drop it into the middle. Here you've got a very customizable, exactly like Word, cover page where you can import your agency logo. You can put the details on of how you normally work a case. So if you normally work a case, and we'll put our text box here, and say the first detail is a suspect name, then at the very bottom of the report you'd have investigating officer, and then hit OK. If I save this as a template now, every time I come back I simply need to come into this block, go to edit, and then fill in my suspect details. It's just a way of creating a template to save duplication. If this is the way you work every time, create the document, spend the time. No different to the preparation and planning that we covered at the beginning of this webinar. This is all going to save you time. And then we might want to include an audit log. We know how XAMN if the option is turned on, will keep an audit log of every artifact that's been viewed, what's been tagged, what's been entered as examiner notes, and you can include that if you want to show your working. As we go down the system blocks, we've also got case information. And before we get there, we might want to start thinking about chapters. We want our report to look and read like a report. So we might want to drop a chapter in there. And this chapter is going to be called Case Details. So I've now got a nice chapter heading that's going to be easy to follow for someone with Adobe PDF Viewer, for example. And then we're going to want to drop some of the case information. So the case information that I've got here is then going to go into that report. So if I drop case data, and I'm going to drop it straight into case details, hit OK. I'm also going to want to contain in my report what applications were present on this device. Drop it into case details, hit OK, and now that's my chapter and it's containing those blocks. I then might want to put on the exhibits, so the data sources. So I'm going to drop another chapter here and I'm going to call this exhibits. And then if I come to data sources, I'm going to want the summary of that exhibit. I'm going to want the general information and the device overview, which you can see I dragged it into the wrong place, but I can simply just move it and put it into there. And you can see that my report is now taking on some resemblance of what a report would look like. And I might have things such as executive summary and other ways that you normally lay out your reports. So say if I want to create this template and then we get into, say, a chapter of attribution. I'm going to know in attribution that I'm going to have some tags or some evidence to drop into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a placeholder into attribution saying add data block or tags. So now when I hit OK, I'm going to know when I come back to my template that I need to drag some actual evidence into that location. And if I come down to here, say this was my attribution, the device, time zone and language, I just drag that into attribution, chooses what format I want, and if you're unsure of how these look in the report, you can always press preview. I'm going to have it as slim, press OK, and now in my attribution I've got my data block. And you could carry on until you got to your summary at the end. Now if I'd spent the time laying out this how I want it to, I can then come up to here and save my template. It would then allow me to share that template with other investigators in my department. This way it means we work to the same standard. So any prosecuting office or defence office are going to get used to the way our reports look. It's standardising them, it's making a professional look, and they're going to get used to the layout of these reports. It's going to save us explaining and for them to understand how our reports work. But I might also want to open a template. So somebody has created this template and you now need to open it. So I can simply go to here, and I always make a folder in my documents folder called Report Builder, and I have different templates. So I might want a very simple one, a triage one, or I might want one that's a full case, where I've maybe got a defence that I need to disprove. So if I come up to here, full case, so at the moment we've got blocks in there that are unsaved. Do I want to save them? No, I don't, just for this demo. And here is a report I've made earlier. So you can see that I've got picture blocks that are waiting for pictures to be inserted that could be of the exhibit. I've got page breaks, and page breaks are there to make the report more presentable. You don't want tons and tons of data that never have any breaks. You can see I start with exhibits examined. I have my qualifications and experience at the top, circumstances of the case, the investigation details, the executive summary, what are my findings, and here are my data blocks. And I conclude with a summary. And any of these items I can drag in as I go. And once I hit generate, that's going to create a PDF output of that report. This is just a way to improve your way of working, automate and remove duplication. So let us return to our slide deck. Now we know why you've come back, and that is the chance to win the Coveted Challenge coin. Now in part 2, I shared a link for the sample file that we're going to need for this mini capture the flag. Now if you tried to open that file in XAMN, you would have been greeted with the requirement of a password. Now the password to unlock those files is on screen now, and in the red box is the password that you need to unlock it. If you haven't had a chance to download those files as of yet, the QR code on screen will take you to those files for you to download. Now what is the challenge? The challenge is quite simple. It's 10 questions, and it's going to be dealing with an unsupported application. And you can see the password is within that challenge document, as well as the rules and the questions. You can submit the questions back in any format, just by email or within a text document. And the quickest response with the most correct is going to be the winner of the challenge coin. If you don't have access to the question document and you've joined this webinar after the event, please feel free to reach out to me and I will happily provide you with a copy, even if you just wanted to try out and see how you got on against the challenge. Now of course we are going to review that capture the flag, and the QR code on screen is going to take you straight to the registration page to review the answers, which we're going to do on July 25th. We will also reveal the winner, and I'm going to go through and show you how I would have tackled that challenge. And last but not least, I want to thank you for taking the time out from your busy day to join us for part 3 webinar. And we hope that you've enjoyed it. We hope that you've seen the importance of planning your investigation, having the capability to deal with unsupported apps. And if you have any questions around this webinar series or in general in your investigation career, please feel free to reach out to me on adam.furman@msab.com. But for one last time, thank you very much for joining MSAB for our webinars, and we hope to see you on another webinar again soon. Thank you very much.